So, welcome you all. I'm outside Westminster, the Houses of Parliament and the House of Lords here in central London. And the Union Jack is flying. We can see it. Hi there, Donny. Hi, James. Hi, Mandev. So, Saturday the 2nd of June. It looks like there was a very successful day up in Manchester. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it. But from what I've seen from the live streams, there was a few thousand up in Manchester, so that looked a really good day. I don't know if any of you online were in Manchester. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about Tommy, the situation with Tommy Robinson, and one other thing as well. So Tommy's team has announced that the appeal is going to be prepared for, which is good news. So the appeal against his incarceration for 13 months, which was decided within the space of 4 or 5 hours, which certainly does not sound like due process to me. So obviously we understand he was on a suspended sentence, and some of that 13 months, 3 months I believe, is for that remaining suspended sentence. But 10 months, so an additional 10 months can be decided practically at the click of the fingers, when we know Tommy did not have his own legal representation, because his team were told he was going to be released, so his own lawyer didn't bother travelling up to Leeds, and he was just given the basic court solicitor, which clearly is deceitful and is not due process at all. So let's hope a good appeals process can be put together, and that he doesn't have to stay at Her Majesty's pleasure for 13 months, which would take him to, April 2019. And the other subject I wanted to mention, for those Brits amongst you will be aware of this guy, but a lovely guy, British Pakistani heritage guy, who's currently also staying at Her Majesty's pleasure, called Mr. Anjem, or Andy to his mates, Choudary. Now, Anjem Choudary was a hardcore, radical Islamist who was having spouted his absolute nonsense for decades, was finally banged up in 2016 for a 5.5-year sentence. As I say, he'd been going around spreading his evil, radical Islam. He seemed to be on speed dial to the BBC whenever they wanted a Muslim spokesman. Our Andy was the guy that they called upon. And he is connected to practically every radical Muslim terrorist that has emanated from these shores, from these 4 shores of Britain. So, you name them, the shoe bomber, the guys that planned liquid bombs on planes. And obviously we have to thank those guys for the fact that now all airline travellers around the entire world cannot take fluids on, because it was one of Andy's mates that was planning liquid bomb attacks on airliners. The killers of Lee Rigby were also associates and members of Andy's merry crew. The list goes on and on and on. And the authorities let this man run riot for years. As I say, the state broadcaster would wheel him out if they wanted a Muslim viewpoint on something. Finally, what got his comeuppance was that he made public videos that he put online, actively encouraging his supporters to support ISIS. And the authorities finally saw fit to bang him up for that. So as I said, he could have been given a 10-year sentence, but he was actually only given a 5.5-year sentence. And he's due to be released this October 2018, when he would have served half his sentence. He was also on one second. He was also transferred to Britain's very first specific secure unit for radical Muslims. In order to, because he was refusing to stop preaching and converting people in prison to his cause. So he was one of the very, very first radical Muslims to be put in specific, they got called jihadi units in the British jails, to stop the real problem of them converting other people in prison to their radical, violent, terrorist-supporting cause. So, as I say, he was one of the first radical Muslims to be put in one of these units for the extremists, and yet he's due out this October. So, which would be, 6 months before Tommy's sentence is due to expire. Now, I have seen comments online connecting these two. You know, was it the state's objective to get Tommy put away before Anjem Choudary is released? Now, I understand when Anjem Choudary will be released, he will be under strict terms and conditions for his release. But, you know, those of his supporters, and bizarrely I saw one of them in my local supermarket only a couple of days ago, you know, they will be responding with glee to their glorious leader's release from jail. So, you know, he may be being released. We only hope that he'll be under very, very close surveillance and monitoring, which I'm sure will be significantly more expensive than if he was just kept in jail. But hey, that's the British system for you. So he will be out on our streets in October. I'm not sure how long his release conditions will apply for. Hopefully at least until the end of the initial 5.5-year period. But clearly, you know, he's not changed his ways. He didn't change his ways in prison, which is why he had to be put in a specific, secure jihadi unit. He ain't going to change his ways when he gets out. He will continue to be a problem. Let's hope at least the BBC don't have him on speed dial to wheel him out when they want a Muslim opinion on something. So, you know, what two crazy uses of justice, our justice system. Firstly, the incarceration of Tommy Robinson, and also wanted to point out what Tommy Robinson did outside that Leeds court case was basically read out information that was publicly available on the BBC's website, amongst lots and lots of other news and media websites. So he simply read out the names of those appearing in court that day, that Friday, of which the details were all fully declared and publicised on the BBC's very own website. So if Tommy Robinson has done wrong, shouldn't someone in the BBC also be in prison? So, you know, all he did was read out the names. He checked with the police what he was doing was okay. He wasn't on the court premises. He was on the public highway. What the police initially said he was being arrested for was absolute and utter nonsense, breach of the peace. He clearly wasn't breaching any peace whatsoever. So they'd obviously, you know, the coppers on the street had just been shunted out and told to arrest him and hadn't even been told the right reason. So, you know, they clearly said that it's all for us all to see on video that he was being arrested for a breach of the peace. That then altered to contempt of court. Contempt of court, even though he wasn't in court, he wasn't even on the court premises, he was on the public highway, he was only repeating information that the BBC themselves had reported on the web. So clearly, absolute, utter nonsense. And also, I've had clarification that the court case that day was the announcement of the verdict. It wasn't the hearing of the case. It wasn't, you know, no jury were considering the outcome that day. Simply, that court case that day was the announcement of the verdict. So, therefore, how could anything that Tommy said, or anyone else, come to that, be in any way contempt of court? And if it was, then clearly the BBC and other media outlets were equally guilty. And also, you know, there's been many videos online clearly showing other media outlets filming this situation, filming this court case, and actually filming the earlier court case when evidence was being considered and guilt was being considered. So again, those guys haven't been hauled before the courts. Those guys haven't been thrown in jail. So clearly, even if to the letter Tommy has breached the law, has breached the terms of his suspended sentence, clearly it is being applied wholly differently to Tommy than it has been to anyone else whatsoever. Oh, we've got a viewer from Russia online. Privyet. Как дела? I shan't try and pretend that I can speak Russian. So, as we've seen before with other court cases against Tommy, the letter of the law is applied strictly to Tommy in a way that it is not applied to Horoshaw, Spasiba, in a way that it's not been applied to lots and lots of other individuals and lots of other media outlets. And we're going to have one of the most radical nutjobs who has been behind, I think, every single British-based Muslim terrorist plot that we've had for decades. That guy is going to be walking the streets. Yet Tommy is not. Now, anyone explain to me the logic of those two situations, because I certainly don't get it. And here I stand outside the mother of all parliaments. The mother of all parliaments, they say. What is your name? Steve. Isn't that on the on the Periscope account? I stand outside the mother of all parliaments. Yet I can only think that these instructions, if they're not coming from inside that building there, they're coming from a building down that way, towards Vauxhall, a green concrete building. Because clearly there are decisions that have been made from a very, very senior level of how this guy needs to be treated. As I said before, it wasn't the coppers that drove up with the police van that are making this decision. The decision to incarcerate Tommy, to get Tommy out of the way, has come from up on high. Clearly, they are terrified of Tommy's impact. But don't you think this is rather blown up in their faces, though? The interest, the numbers of people that are outraged by what's happened to Tommy Robinson across Britain, but not only across Britain, across the world. I understand he's been given promises of asylum in Germany, in Australia. There's been protests in America, in Australia, in Denmark. This story has gone international. Now, I don't suppose the guys sitting in their suits in their offices of the British state, anticipated at all that would be the reaction. But that's the reaction they've got. And I just hope that this will continue. It's not 2 weeks yet. But we've already had multiple demonstrations across towns in Britain. We've got another one planned here in London next Saturday at 3 o'clock, 3 p.m, I believe. And, of course, is the mainstream media covering these demonstrations? No, of course not. Far too embarrassing for them. But when they do make any mentions of this whole situation, it's the old lazy, sad tarnishing of far-right, ex-leader of the EDL, racist, xenophobe, absolute nonsense. But of course they can do this now because they think they can do it because they think Tommy's banged away now. So, he's not going to react to it as he reacted quite rightly previously when journalists slandered him and libelled him by calling him far right. When will the media understand what I think the British public understand, that standing against Islamic terrorism, standing against Islamic grooming gangs, is not racist. It's not far right. If anything, it's standing up against racism. We know this grooming gang scandal. It is a racially based crime. It's a racially based crime against white English girls, against Sikh girls, from one racial group, from largely, significantly, Pakistani Muslim men. Every single city in England that has a sizable Muslim Pakistani population, they're coming out one by one. And the government are saying that they're holding an inquiry into this problem. We wait and see whether that inquiry has any balls whatsoever. But the few people that have spoken out about this problem, this racist mass crime, mass rape. It's been said, and I agree, it shouldn't be called a grooming scandal. It's a rape scandal. It's a racist rape scandal, which the British authorities, be it centrally in places like this, or locally by councils, by social services, has been covered up for decades. And now it is coming out, town by town, city by city. So Tommy was one person that's been speaking out about this for decades. Yes, grooming sounds far too nice, doesn't it? Grooming is like what you do to your dog or to your horse to make it look nice. Let's not call it grooming. Let's call it what it is. A racist rape scandal. A racist en masse rape scandal. And just imagine for 1 minute if the boot was on the other foot. Do you think there would be a cover-up then? Do you think the mainstream media would not be covering it then? Of course they would. It would be outrage. It would be front-page stories. There would be mass riots and problems on the streets and people screeching, racists, racists, racists. But that hasn't been happening because it's the protected religion of peace, which appears to get away with practically, and in some cases literally, murder. So, I don't know if any of you have got any questions from anyone? Any questions before I go? No questions. Okay, so, hi Adriana. Hi there. So as I say, next Saturday we've got another mass protest in London, in Whitehall at 3 p.m. So hopefully those of you that can will make it to London. Today we had a protest in Manchester. It wasn't solely about the Tommy issue. It was about the specific terrorist bombing that we had in Manchester and the general subject of free speech. Tomorrow we've got Speaker's Corner. I should be there. The Dawa teams, they did go a little bit quiet after the first few weeks, after Tommy's first visit to Speaker's Corner. But those of them that legally can are now back there with a vengeance. So pretty much all the old infamous names, other than the Flump, the terrorist Flump, who legally cannot go to Speaker's Corner because he's got a ban pending his court case. So that's Abdul Hamid. But pretty much all the other notorious radical extremist ISIS supporting numpties are now back there with a vengeance, as I said. But of course they're all very, very conscious of what they can say and what they can't say. And compared with sort of 10, 15 years ago, when they would be absolutely openly spouting their support of ISIS, they now know they can't do that because they'll be thrown in jail. But, they say enough to make it very clear that they are still of that opinion. But they're just trying to keep carefully within the law because they don't want to be banged up. But, you know, they're still there with their nasty, violent, intimidating, threatening tactics. Nothing has changed. So, you know, we've got to keep up the good fight at Speaker's Corner. As well as them being back, there is a good range of lots of other people going to Speaker's Corner, which is really, really great to see. So I hope very much that that keeps up, and that we keep Speaker's Corner for what it always has been, the absolute home and bastion of free speech. And Islam or any other groups will never control it, will never limit what is said there, and what can't be said there. I think, you know, the police do seem to be keeping a lid on them as the collective worship regulation, and that seems to be controlled. Although, interestingly, they are just doing it outside the gate now, but quite frankly, you know, that's another issue. If they're keeping out of Speaker's Corner doing it, that's good by me. Although I'm sure it will become a bit of a security or clearance issue at the gateway. So, any other questions? Do you know if anyone has visited Tommy? Well, no, I only probably know what you know in terms of apparently his family were preparing to go and visit him, but that was pulled at the last minute. Which again, if that is true, that sounds very dodgy and unfair. And again, you think, you know, what if that is true? Why might that be? Is it just more ensuring stress and strain on him and his family, or are they covering something up? But, you know, whatever reason, it wasn't very fair and it wasn't a very good thing to do. So that's as much as I know on him and how he is. Any other questions? It's an absolute beautiful day down here in London. I don't know why I'm giving you a weather briefing, but hey. Tommy deserves his sentence to be extended. 13 months not enough for you. Why is that? Why is 13 months, in your view, not even enough? Are you going to give me any explanations? Is anyone going to DC? What is DC? Washington, DC? What is DC? What a well thought out argument. What argument is that? The only beautiful thing about London is the motorway out of it. Are you saying that as a British person? So you really think the law is being applied equally, do you? The law is the law. Rally in DC tomorrow. Where is DC? Oh, District of Columbia. I wouldn't know. You Yankees must have to explain that one to me. Good though. More demos than the merrier. As I said, it's international. Much to the annoyance of the idiot that's saying, well, I'm not giving any argument and that 13 months isn't enough. Yes. Walk through Tower Hamlets. Apart from the one little niche area of Brick Lane, which is very, very reliant on tourists and visitors who flock to it for the curry houses, which are fantastic, and you get a very nice curry down there. The rest of Tower Hamlets is a shithole. If you walk down Whitechapel, I'm not sure of course, Whitechapel High Street, where the market is, what an absolute filthy, foul dump that area is. Full of women in burqas walking a few paces behind their men. And I am not making that up. It's a filthy, filthy hellhole. Any other comments, questions? I love these keyboard warriors who sit at home and launch their nonsense, not knowing anything about anything. Yeah, compare Whitechapel with an area, and those of you from Britain might have heard of this, Southall. You know, Southall always has been an Indian area. Well, I say always has been for a number of decades. Yet Southall is a lovely area. Southall has a high proportion of Hindus, has a high proportion of Sikhs, and it is a lovely area. It's a lovely, calm, peaceful area. Comparing Southall with Whitechapel, with Tower Hamlets, you cannot compare them. So before you numpties start saying, you're racist, you just don't like Whitechapel because there are non-white people in there, it's absolutely nothing to do with it. I love Southall. I love other areas that are incredibly multi-ethnic and diverse on the ethnicity front. But the hellholes are the Islamic areas. Southall, so far, is not an Islamic area. Although I will say they're on the rise there, and there are some dodgy mosques that have opened up in Southall. But generally, it's a wonderful, great area. And when the Sikh festivals are on, it absolutely is rammed solid. Not just with Sikhs, but with other people coming there to experience it. Australian, who backs Tommy here? Well, who wouldn't back Tommy? No mosques, no problems. Well, it would be nice to imagine that one day Islam can reform, that the idiots won't be the ones with the power, with the influence, and with the control, as they seem inevitably to get, wherever they get their numbers higher. It would be nice to think that could happen. And then, whether we're Christian, atheist, Hindu, Sikh, or Muslim, we can all live together peacefully, all respect the laws of this land, all respect the cultures of this land, just like the Sikhs have been doing for decades, just like the Hindus have been doing for decades. It's just this one group that comes here and is not satisfied with living by the cultural norms of the country, and not satisfied living by the laws, the regulations, the policies, the practices of this country. It, to me, seems only one religion, people of one religion, that seem to have a problem with that seem to want to corrupt our laws and our cultures, seem to want to do their own thing, to want to follow their own rules and regulations, even when they're in stark contradiction to the laws, the regulations, and the ways of this country. Only one. But it doesn't have to be that way, does it? But of course, those Muslims that speak out and agree with me, we know what happens to them. Sometimes they are literally murdered, or they are shouted down, and the other Muslims do everything they can to silence them. Well, you say it has to be eradicated from the face of the earth. Do I really give a toss whether in a cave in Afghanistan or in the middle of Pakistan people are living by this barbaric interpretation of Islam? Do I really care? I suppose as a human being I do. When you see video footage of women being beaten in the market square, just generally the way the women are treated by their menfolk, I suppose I do give a damn, and I shouldn't just blindfold myself to what's going on over there, because it's wrong wherever it happens, and wherever human beings are living under its influence, it is wrong and evil. Yeah, child brides. Only... there are, I suppose, one benefit is that, we start to hear about cases now in Britain where parents who have forced their daughters, their young daughters, into forced marriages, cases, not many, but they are starting to go to court, and parents are being convicted for it. So, there you go. I'm going to go. Bid you farewell. And hope you all have a nice Saturday evening. And maybe I shall see you at Speaker's Corner. I may do a bit of live streaming, we'll see. And happy California to you all, to those of you that are there.